Good morning. Top of the morning to you. It is a wonderful, beautiful St. Patrick's Day, and we're glad you're here. We wanted to get started with planting a garden, looking at seed packets, what all that stuff really means, how to get plants started at home, what kind of soil you have, things like that. So we'll try not to get into a whole lot of really big detail unless you have questions at the end. But what I'm trying to do is at least get you started in the right direction. We will be here, of course. We have been here through all of COVID. We'll continue to be here 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. I'm Carol. You can email me, carol.wilder@uky.edu. And there will be, if there's not already, there will be some links that are attached to this so that you can get into the paperwork that I'll be talking about, the publications and so forth that UK have to support what we're going to talk about today. First thing, if you're going to plant a garden, where are you going to put it? Is it going to be something you're going to do inside, in containers, out in the yard? You have to make those decisions depending upon the place that you have and the amount of room you have. If you're doing it outside, you may want to test your soil, and we recommend it to get your pH and your basic nutrients. Now, obviously, we have a publication for that, but if you get on our website and you go to horticulture, there is all kinds of information about soil testing, and it's how to take a good sample. It's making sure it's dry, bringing it in, how to fill out the forms. We have them here so we can still be distant, socially distant, and still be safe and get you results within 2 weeks or so. It's only $8, but if you want to go through the Soil and Water Conservation District, they have a grant where they give you a voucher or a coupon, and you can have 2 places done for free that they'll support because they're doing research Jefferson County and other areas. So that's an option, and all that information is on our website, so I'm not going to get bogged down in the details, but that is all there. And if you have other questions at the end of this, of course, you can always give us a call too. So once you get your soil test back and you have your garden ready to go, what do you want to plant? Look at how much you want to plant, the area you have, how far distant you're going to be planting your plants. And if you're not sure of that, we have something we call our gardening Bible. And that is ID 128. We live and breathe by this for Kentucky gardening. The first 20 pages or so have tables that tell you whether or not a plant does better by a start, does better planted by seed, whether it's something that has to be planted with a crown or with a set like an onion would be. There are a whole lot of different options when it comes to plants and how you want to plant them. It doesn't mean you can't grow onions from seed. It's just going to take a little longer to get to a large onion. So you have some choices and you make a decision based on what you and your family prefer. This book has tables for all of that. How much you're going to get out of 1,000 square feet, how much you're going to get out of a row, how deep should you plant, how far apart. This literally is going to tell you all you need to know that way. It's also going to give you your earliest and latest planting dates. And that is worth its weight in gold right there. And those don't have to be written in bold dates, but they're very general. We're considered central, but it's very general. You need to have an idea on when you're going to be successful planting. So you really want to know, if I've got tender tomatoes, am I going to be okay planting at the end of April? Well, maybe not. This past year, on the 6th of May, we had a frost that would have stunted or really slowed down the growth or possibly killed a tomato plant that you might have had out there. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to make you as successful as possible. So that's why that's put in there. Always go by your seed packet if you want more detail. Now, having given you the big commercial on our ID 128.
All right, I'm going to pause for a second, Carol, and get the links that you put in. I'm just having a little trouble holding this up, so I'm going to set the screen down for a second.
That's okay. You've got our seeds there probably on the screen.
Let me get those links. Okay. All right. All right, and just a second, let me grab, we are our county website. I just put a whole bunch of links to all the publications that Carol is going to be talking about, and I'm gonna pull up our county website. The first one that I typed in didn't work, so I'm just gonna grab it off here real quick. Okay, dokie. Here we go. And then here is the link to our county extension website. All right. Sorry about that, folks. There you go. Lots of links.
Awesome. So now we can get started there. So once you have an idea on how much you want to plant and what you're planting, you may have some questions on whether or not they're disease resistant, whether they work in Kentucky. Is this a variety that's going to perform well? Ta-da! We have a phenomenal publication on recommended varieties of vegetables. We also have them for fruit, but that's next week. So this has got everything you want, from asparagus to tomatoes and watermelon. And if you can get in there, you get an idea that it's showing you the type of vegetable. If the vegetable has different characteristics within the genus, you've got, for instance, a patio tomato or a cherry tomato, a determinate tomato, which means it's a tomato that's more bush-like and tends to come on all at once, or an indeterminate. They produce all through the season, but they tend to be more viney. If they're disease resistant, for instance, this is all tomatoes right here, and this is showing you, you've got a variety there. It may not have every single tomato you see on the market, but it gives you an idea on what grows well in Kentucky. Others grow well here too, but these have been researched. This came out in 2013. I expect there to be another one out this year or next year. About every 8 to 10 years, they put a new one out. But it takes them several years with new varieties to make sure they actually do grow well in Kentucky. They're not going to publish it if it doesn't grow well here. Now, is it going to grow well on your particular piece of property? Well, that's going to depend on pH, water, and a lot of things that we can't tell you right off the bat. But this is an excellent place to start. It gives you names of the type of tomato, whether or not they're resistant to diseases and that kind of thing. And then, of course, the days to maturity. There's a big difference in something that's mature in 54 days, where you can go ahead and take that tomato off the vine, or something that's more close to 90. So that's a big difference when it comes to expecting fruit off of your plants. So that gives you an idea, and it's a comparison right at your fingertips. You can find it online. You can also print it off and then have it in hand when you're looking through your seed catalogs.
And the link to that is in the chat. So if you want to access that as well, it is in that whole list of links that was posted.
And if you can't find seed or the transplants, of course, you can go to your seed catalog books. Now, this is Johnny's Seed, Burpees, Starks, Stark Brothers. There's a slew of them out there, and there's a lot of specialty seed producers as well, seed savers, organic seeds. And most of them, if you're going to order them, they can get it to you pretty quick, so you can get those seeds started or in the ground as soon as you need. But this is an example, and there are, if you can see, there are just pages and pages of veggies, flowers, and things that you may want to be starting in and around your home. Now, yes, I'm talking about vegetable gardens, but this also applies to annual and perennial flowers. Starting from seed is an inexpensive, wonderful way to do that. We're also going to be talking about plant propagation next month. One thing about seed packets, if you're going out and looking, check those packets. Inexpensive. These are at the dollar store. This is for microgreens that can be grown on your kitchen counter. If you have questions about that, email me or call us, because this is something that you're going to literally harvest, use on salads and whatever within 2 weeks. It's really easy. Now I think this is cool because this particular one is a hot mix, which means it's going to be kind of spicy. It's going to carry some of those spices with it when you go ahead and cook with it. So it might be good in really spicy chilies, stews, curries, things like that, where you might want to put in something a little bit more nutritional. The nice thing about microgreens is they've got a slew of nutritious additives, or not additives, excuse me, nutritious greens with it, because you've got not only the energy from the seed packet, but you've also got what the plant is producing, of course, through photosynthesis as it's starting. So this is an excellent way to get antioxidants and all kinds of things. Now, again, your seeds don't have to be super expensive, but when you're looking at a seed packet, now your better companies are going to give you a lot of information on the front. They're going to tell you days to harvest on the front, the type of vegetable and so forth. On the back, there is a date. If it is not dated for this year, ignore it, don't take it, because it hasn't been tested by the USDA.
So that date is actually right under your finger, Carol.
Of course it is.
Other side.
Ah.
Aha.
Aha.
There we go. So it'll
Sorry
say,
about that.
It is a little small to read. So it'll say packed for, right? 21, yep. Sell by 12/21.
Now, many of these will work the next year if you don't use all of them. Some seed can lose up to about 8% viability, but it's always worth it if you have old seed to try it, but it is going to lose some viability on some seeds, especially things like tomato seeds that are small. The other thing is you'll notice that there are 2 barcodes. There's a second code up here that you can go on the internet with that code, and you can find out more about this particular variety. So the seed companies are bringing themselves into the 21st century, and they're giving us technology to use with our seeds so that we can get a better idea of what we're growing. On the back, you'll also see germination time.
Real quick on that code. So the code on the top that you see, it says online code right there. So you can, if you've got a smartphone, you can take a picture of that with your phone, and it'll take you to that seed company's website, and it'll show additional information about the plant as well.
The back of this seed packet, as well as the front, is very, very good for you to keep. It has a boatload of information. Every year, I just have a folder that has an envelope or a section where I can just drop the seed packets, and I keep them. So then I can go back and look at, okay, this particular type of tomato is to be harvested in about maybe 54, 55 days. That's when I can look for it. It becomes really valuable when you start looking at things like watermelon, pumpkins, things like that, that aren't as easy to tell when they're ripe. So you've got the day as far as when you plant it, just make a note, and then you know how far you've come before harvest. So this can be invaluable, just keeping that seed packet if you're going to start. If you're going to start these at home, there are a slew of ways to do that. Jiffy, they're the folks that make the Jiffy. This pellet became this pot without a pot for seed to be planted in. It's an excellent way to start seed. Once you start seeing roots out of the side, you can either repot, you can keep it moist, or you can put it in a bigger planter if that's what you're going to be doing as far as a container. But this tiny disc actually absorbs to this size. So people wonder, how is this going to plant my tomatoes or whatever? And you can see that once it's absorbed that moisture, that you've got an awful lot of room here for roots to grow. I always start with warm water with that because you're going to get a reaction very quickly. And that is in a kit similar to this. Came out of this. This has the bottom that you would put your different pellets. Once they've absorbed water, they would fit right in here so that you can keep them moist without them being wet and sitting in water. And then you have a top, once you've planted, that gives it a greenhouse effect. Once or twice a day, you may want to open that and get fresh air in. But that is your miniature greenhouse for starting seed. Now, people ask, do you need to have a warmer underneath? Most seed will start between 65 and 80 degrees. So if you've got approximately 70, 72 degrees, you're fine. If you are going to be planting in a basement, you know, that's really cold or something like that, you can have a warmer under it, but take the temperature of that warmer, that heating pad, to see whether or not it's going to get too hot. Last year, my husband did that, and he didn't realize that he had it set on a high setting for it, and he literally had plants that came up and fried. So we started again and it was fine. But if you're not paying attention to the amount of heat that's on the bottom, it's really not doing you any good. As far as light is concerned, a fluorescent, the easiest and most expensive way is a fluorescent light. Either have it shining straight on it, have a light bar attached to any kind of frame. You can buy them, you can make them yourself. Fluorescent lights are great. It's the end of the light spectrum that plants are going to need. They're not going to do well with infrared, which is red and yellow light. They will do much better at the blue and purple end. If you have or have had pets in the past, exotic pets where they've used the full spectrum lights that you can find for aquariums and so forth, those work too. They're more expensive, but if you happen to have them, there's not a whole lot of incandescent lights found anymore because of the amount of energy and heat they put out, but we do not recommend them because of the heat and because of the fact that it's just not the light spectrum the plants are going to respond to. But even growing in the fluorescent lights we have here, I get really good germination within a week planting in a room where there is no actual light. So you can do that in a basement, anywhere where you can get those temps and get a light source there. And because that light source is fairly cool, you can get it very close to the top of those plants. So once you get those plants planted and started, then the question becomes, how am I going to plant them? Well, hopefully at this point, we have gotten soil tests back, whether you till or no till, and you can call me about the differences in that. Once you've got it prepared and you plant, don't fertilize when you plant. Fertilize several weeks before, several weeks after. You want the plants to get established before you start throwing fertilizer at them. Now, for the most part, I'm talking about chemical fertilizers, Miracle-Gro, things like that. If you're using composted cow manure, horse manure, something like that, that can be tilled in, that can be worked with them right away. That's not burning. It's not in a form where the salts and so forth are going to cause damage to those baby plants. If you're starting with a very small space or raised beds, that publication is here.
And the link is in the chat too, gardening in small spaces.
Right. And it literally is talking about putting plants in containers, talking about raised beds, talking about small gardens to get the most out of it. The ID 128, the book that I was talking about being our garden Bible, it also gives you excellent information on intensive garden and small spaces. What to plant right now. St. Patrick's Day, traditional, plant peas. If you're starting in really early spring and you go through summer and through fall, you get basically 3 seasons if you really keep up with it, and that's what your end game is. You don't have to, but it is possible. And it can save you a lot, and you know what has been put into that plant as far as chemicals, as far as how you've taken care of diseases and insects, so you know where it has come from. Once you get those plants planted, there are several things to keep in mind so that you don't have problems later on in the garden. If you know you've had a problem with diseases, rotate. Insects, rotate. Wherever in that garden you've had them, divide it up into thirds. Wherever you start year 1, that's where you put your tomatoes, your eggplants, your potatoes, and your peppers. And then move down and move down. By the time you get back up to 1, those pathogens that might be in the soil have had a chance to die out because you're not feeding them what they want. And they want plants in that family. Same thing with cucumbers, the same thing with beans. If you've had problems with those insects or diseases for those particular plants, rotation is the best thing. There's a reason for hundreds of years why farmers have rotated. They didn't know why as far as the science behind it, but they understood that as they rotated and let the ground sit and go fallow, that yes, plants responded and they got a better crop. So now we have more of the science as to why. So now what we're trying to do is keep those insects that might be in the ground away from those plants or give them a chance to die out naturally. So rotation is going to help. The other thing is put a mulch down. You can take regular newsprint. The Courier Journal uses soy ink. It's not going to put lead into your garden or anything like that. You can put a couple of sheets of that down and then, cut it to fit your garden and put mulch on top of it. And that will help not only keep weeds from coming up, it's also going to keep your temperature and your moisture a little bit more consistent instead of going up and down like it would in the summer where it would dry out and get wet, dry out and get wet, or get hot and cool and hot and cool. It's more even. Plants don't go through as much stress. The other thing is don't work in the garden when it's wet because you'll transfer disease on your shoes, on your pants, and going from plant to plant. And we want you to be successful. And try not to water overhead. We can't do anything about God and Mother Nature. Rain's going to come that way. But what we do, if we can either water down low or put in soaker hoses, it's the easiest way to actually water. And soaker hoses are very, very efficient. So your water bill will be much less if you can use a soaker hose system. Now, not everybody can. If you're in a community garden or something like that, you may not be able to have access to that. But soaker hoses, it's a one-time value or a one-time expense. It's a lot of value. You're going to use them year after year, and you use them underneath the mulch. The water goes exactly where you want it to go. So therefore, you're then taking care of these plants so that you're as successful as possible. Your soil test is going to tell you what you need basically. And then about 4 to 6 weeks, you might want to side dress with, if you're going organic, with more of your cow or horse manure, or again with your plant foods, depending upon whether or not they're foliar or granular. You might want to do that down your rows so that, again, you never do that up against the plant if it's granular, unless it says on the package to spray it on the foliage. And you'll want to do that early morning, simply because then it's not going to burn. We don't want to see salts and chemicals that may be in your fertilizer to burn any foliage. So the best time to do that's going to be early morning. But that's what you're looking at as far as getting your garden started. Were there any questions?
And feel free to put questions either in the chat or shout them out.
Hi, Carol. This is Bethany Brown. I was wondering, you had said you could use newspaper under the mulch. What about cardboard?
You can use cardboard. It's just that it's a little thicker and has glues and stuff, and I found it doesn't degrade as quick, but you can use it.
You would definitely want to cut a hole in the cardboard
Yes.
for your plant if that's
Oh,
what you're
definitely,
gonna use.
definitely. Leave room for the plant to grow and extend around it, because as you know, as an example, tomatoes, they're very small when you put them in, but they get almost trunk-like, tree-like when they get bigger. So you want to have plenty of room for that. Newspaper will give, the cardboard not so much, but it doesn't mean you can't use it along the areas where you'll be walking.
Okay. What about, I've been watching a lot of YouTube videos, so you see all kinds of different things. And this one particular gentleman, he puts down cardboard over top of his dirt. And then he puts like 3 inches of compost on top of the cardboard, and he plants his plants into the compost. What do you think about that?
I think he's going to have problems if he has a Kentucky summer, because you're going to be out there watering 4 or 5 times a day. If you've only got 3 or 4 inches of compost you've planted in.
Okay. Yeah, he's
Because
in London, so that makes sense.
Right. So
Got a lot of rain.
not that that's not good information. It's just that you've got to take into consideration where it's coming from.
Okay.
Their weather is completely different. Their zones are different. We are zone 6B. I don't know if that's going to change, but the higher the number, the higher the temperature gets. The lower the number, the lower the temperatures the plant will take. So obviously, if you're in Florida, it's a 9. If you're up in Michigan, it's a 4. Okay. So you kind of get an idea. Where we're at, we get a lot of radical changes in temperature. So it's not that it stays cold for a long extended period of time, but it can be horribly cold. And then it can be very warm and pleasant all in the same week. We go through all 4 seasons in 1 week in Kentucky many times, especially this time of year. So if you're planting anything, for instance, even the cole crops, the broccolis, the peas, and of course they're not cole crops, but they're cold crops. They're crops that you could put out early. Any of these crops that you're putting out now, you're wanting to make sure that you've got plenty of moisture, of course, but you're also wanting to check and see if we're going to have some of those dips. Is that plant you put out going to take it? Now, most of these early plants are going to be just fine. But if you plant really early with warmer, softer tissued plants, then you're going to have some issues and you're just going to need to be prepared to cover them.
All right. We have another question that just came in from the chat. And then Margie, I saw yours. We'll get to that next. Todd asks, can you talk a little about best practices in composting?
Oh, sure. Make preferably 1 to 2 piles, one that you're putting stuff in, the other where it is already breaking down. And that way you know what you're taking from and you know where you're putting your scraps and so forth. Never, of course, compost meat, grease, or dairy. Now, the only exception to quote unquote meat or proteins would be eggshells. Just crunch them up and throw them in. Sometimes you'll have wildlife that are interested, so you can always put a lid or a top over it if you're not using a regular composter, which you can purchase. You don't have to, but you may want to put a lid over it just to keep wildlife out. There's nothing more disturbing to me than to go out and find a raccoon arguing with me over my trash cans when I go and put them out on Thursday nights. So it just depends on your situation there. But as far as composting, the big thing is the recipe. You want your carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen mixture to be right. And if you need to have that information, it's not on the list there, but give us a call and I can either send you a link or I can send it to you regular paper.
And we have, I don't think Carol mentioned it, but we also have a great YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and search Jefferson County Extension. So this class recording will be up there eventually. Past classes are there, as well as a lot of other great videos, including some specifically on composting. So those are right. YouTube can be a plus or minus, but it's coming from Cooperative Extension, so a lot of good research, and it's tailored to Louisville. So if you are into YouTube videos, it's a good source. And then we have a question from Margie. It says, I have a small garden and feel bad when I have to buy seeds for just a few plants. Is there a brand that is known for small quantities of inexpensive seed?
I don't know specifically of a brand that just has a few. You can try someplace like St. Matthew's Feed and Seed to see if they'll sell you by the ounce what you're needing. You can also, of course, check all of your dollar stores, Dollar General stores, Walmart's, big box stores, and so forth. All of the off-brand seeds that I had here are $1 or less. So if you use half of them one year and half of them the next, you're probably going to be fine. And these are just some examples. This isn't all they had. But it gives you an idea on what's available. The dollar store, the actual dollar stores had them 3 or 5 for $1. So that's pretty inexpensive. And they're all, the ones I saw were all dated for 2021. So they'd already passed USDA inspection.
Also a good opportunity to garden with a friend and split some seed packets too.
Yes.
If you're both know you're going to plant something like green beans, you could buy one seed packet and split it with a friend or neighbor. All right, do folks have other questions? Carol, I was wondering, you have some potting soil next to you. If you wanted to talk about what's going on. You showed us the seed plugs, but we didn't talk about potting soil.
Now, this is specifically for seed starting, which means it's been milled very fine, kind of like putting it in your blender. But it's got all the same kind of ingredients that you would find in regular soil. Although it's probably got a little bit more peat moss in it to have that moisture holding ability. This can be used in something like this where it doesn't come one of these little mini greenhouses where you put your own soil in it. And it can also be used in something like this where you've got the paper, the thin paper that will actually start to decompose, and you can plant it all. The only thing with these is that when you go to plant these, anything that might be sticking up above ground, tear or cut off, because you don't want that wicking water up, because this will take water straight up and it will actually evaporate very fast from this. So you want to trim this down to your soil level when you plant with these. The other soil I have here is just regular garden soil. This I actually found at the dollar store. And that's 8 pounds of soil. Yeah, it's a little bit moist, but it's not super moist. And this would fill as well. This would work better for larger seeds, but that means everything from pumpkins and squash, beans, anything like that you were going to start. Although I find that beans do better for me when I plant them straight in the ground. But the larger seed, this you can't do any better than $1. And this time of year, even if you're going to be doing house plants and so forth later, this is not specific seed starting mix. It's just potting soil, and it's not a bad quality. If you're going to be doing some house plant work or some other container gardening a little bit later in a couple of months, for $1, for 8 pounds, go ahead and grab it. And I apologize for not talking about that earlier. But now is a great time to do shopping for that because everybody's stocked. After Mother's Day in Louisville or in Jefferson County, traditionally, they quit keeping their garden centers quite as stocked as they did. Now, places that always have a garden center, your better nurseries, even Lowe's, Home Depot, and so forth, they've always got some of your garden chemicals, soils, and so forth. So they'll probably have those things that you need. But when you have an opportunity to get soil for $1 and it's decent, it's not bad if you don't need a bale of it. Now, if you need a bale of it, you'll probably get a better deal someplace else. But if you're just doing a couple of window boxes or whatever, that's not a bad price for $1. And I'm not trying to plug dollar stores. It's just that it's a good deal for gardeners.
Absolutely. Another question was, is it necessary to mulch on top of your garden?
No, but it creates a barrier between the soil and the plants. And that mulch, again, helps to keep not only the weeds down, but temperature and moisture more consistent. It saves on your water bill. I mean, it actually will pay for itself. If nothing else, you can use clean straw. One thing about straw, don't get hay. Hay is going to have more weed seed and seed from the actual plants that make up hay. Clean straw is going to have a lot less of that. If you're not sure, take that bale, put it out in the driveway, wet it down a couple of times a day for 2 weeks. Anything in it is going to go ahead and germinate, and then it doesn't matter, use it. So that's just a quick tip there, if you're not sure where your straw came from. But a bale of straw goes a long way for your garden. The light color actually of the straw reflects light back up too, so that's never a bad thing, especially early in the season. Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay.
Erica says, thank you.
If you have other requests for classes that we do, please let us know. I'm going to do a very, very quick commercial for next week. Next week, we're going to talk about perennial vegetables. things like rhubarb and asparagus that you're going to be putting in the ground for a lot longer than one season. And then, of course, we talk about fruit trees, fruit shrubs, and small fruit like strawberries, things that, again, where you're prepping a bed to hopefully hold a plant or grow a plant for a lot longer than 1 year. So it's prepping and getting ready for that kind of growth. And then on April 7th, I don't know where September came from. My brain just went off. We're going to talk about plant propagation. And that's from, we'll talk a little bit about seeds, but cuttings, soft cuttings, tissue cuttings, hard cuttings in and around the home. You've got that favorite rose bush, pluses, minuses, things like that. And really quick, if you wanted to go over some more of the starting plants from Seed at Home publication, that's also listed as a link. And that's got a lot of the information I talked about earlier in print. Dr. Anderson and Dr. Witt were behind this publication. It's a little older, but it's got excellent information on flowers as well as vegetables, starting dates, temperatures, all kinds of information in this publication. So that's what's coming up. And if you have a need for other Zoom class material, let us know. We'll try to work it in. We're just trying to do the most we possibly can for as many people as possible. So every question is valuable and we take it seriously. And if you have a topic you want to discuss, we're right here. So you can always call us or we can do a program.
Absolutely. And I put Carol's phone number and email in the chat while she was talking. So you can always reach her with additional questions by email or by phone. The county extension office is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30. And no question is inappropriate or too dumb. So feel free. Obviously, Carol loves talking about plants. So please give her a call. And we will hang out for a few folks have questions. If you need to head on, that's awesome. We're so glad you all came today. And this video, along with many other past classes, is going to be up on our YouTube page too. So please check those out and check out some other stuff as well. And again, if you have anything that you want to see another class on, please email or call Carol and let her know. We're always looking to do more things.